What is up, everybody? So today is Wednesday, April 17th, and we are bringing you Block Digest 172 at block height 572,045. What is shaking, everybody?
Oh, nothing much, man. It's just been some tumultuous weather, April weather. It's just back and forth, and been kind of a somber week, man. We covered Assange getting brought into custody, and now we've seen the spire of Notre Dame fall in a fire. It's been a pretty crazy week. But how are you guys doing today, Janine? No par?
Well, you saying you're having crazy weather. It actually snowed here recently, which is my kind of weather for spring.
Yeah, we got some spring snows too, but a couple days later it's 70 degrees. I'm telling you, being up in the mountains close to the sun, things change quick. How about you, Nopar? How's the weather hanging out there?
I like nice weather. I don't like snow. I'm actually just coding, so I'm totally missing what's going on in Bitcoin world in the last few days, other than the news desk, of course.
Yeah, man, you've been busy. Saw that little development on Twitter, and going to get into that a little bit later in the discussion. For sure, some interesting developments with Wasabi Wallet. You guys just keep killing it over there.
Yeah, it will be interesting too. I figured out a lot of things. So I just want to start with a quick note that the Bitcoin only guy actually looked at the CoinJoin bounty things, and he read through the thread and gathered together everything, every attempt, and everything that he could dig up regarding the CoinJoin bounty and also the CoinJoin implementations. So that's quite nice. So definitely look at the show notes and check out the Medium articles of the Bitcoin only guy. Okay, so what's going on with Bitcoin Satoshi's vision? What's going on with Satoshi?
Done.
Right on, man. Right into the drama of the week. I mean, like, we started this off with our 0.5 coverage, but this thing has just taken off and the developments have gone a little crazy. So, yeah, let's dig right into this. It looks like CSW and Calvin Iyer are getting lawsuit happy, which has in turn put them at odds with the greater crypto ecosystem. Now they are facing their network being delisted from some of the biggest exchanges in the space, as well as some counter lawsuits. So yeah, at this time, like I said, so we started this off in the 0.5 episode with the Assange special, and at that time, everyone had taken up Hodlnaut's alias, while the character who started the torch himself has fled the scene after Calvin Iyer put out that $5,000 bounty for his true identity. It's upsetting to see that the development surrounding this aspect of the story has taken off, with multiple people trying to identify Hodlnaut through his tattoos seen from one of his old tweets. I've seen some people even going back in time to look up old meetup images claiming they have identified him. All of the backlash that we're seeing today has spurred not just from Iyer's threats to dox Hodlnaut, but also the lawsuits that are peppering important figures in the space for calling out Satoshi's bullshit. First, it was Dan Darkpill and Hodlnaut. Now it's Peter McCormick and Adam Back who are figuring out the response for this blatantly ridiculous lawsuit. Peter McCormick has posted a letter sent to him on his Twitter feed, as well as his rebuttal letter from 15 pro bono attorneys taking up the case. I think Adam Back is taking the easiest route to the embroiled situation. Samson tweeted, quote, We did get a letter from CSW's lawyers addressed to Adam. There's a request to respond by April 23rd, which of course we will ignore. Your move, close quote. The whole thing has gotten so much attention on Bitcoin Twitter that this topic hasn't been able to leave people's consciousness till the point that they were lobbying exchange operators to delist Satoshi's bullshit network. This all came about from a threatening tweet from CZ at Binance saying he'd delist BSV if the charades continued. I think rightly so. The community pushed back until Binance released a tweet announcing their plans to delist BSV. From their statement, quote, "At Binance, we periodically review each digital asset we list to ensure that it continues to meet the high level of standard we expect. When a coin or token no longer meets the standard or the industry changes, we conduct a more in-depth review and potentially delist it. We believe this best protects all of our users. Based on our most recent reviews, we have decided to delist and cease trading on all trading pairs for the following coin, BCHSV, on April 22nd, 2019 at 10 a.m. UTC, close quote. Now we've seen a series of exchanges take up a similar position to reflect the greater crypto community's position. Kraken has ran a vote to gauge sentiment, asking should we delist BSV, with 71% of the vote saying yes, it's toxic. And another bulk of voters, 22%, said they don't care, while only 7% was accumulated between the two options, keeping the network on their exchange. Kraken, being the pillar in a community, followed the sentiment, and I think their statement hit the nail on the head. Quote, "Over the last few months, the team behind Bitcoin SV has engaged in behavior completely antithetical to everything we at Kraken and the wider crypto ecosystem stands for. It started with fraudulent claims, escalating to threats and legal action, with the BSV team suing a number of people speaking out against them. The threats made last week to individuals of the community were the last straw. This aggression will not stand. Alongside other upstanding members of the community and in consultation with more than 70,000 Kraken users, we have decided to delist Bitcoin SV. Deposits will be disabled April 22nd. Trading will cease on all trading pairs April 29th. Withdrawals will continue until May 31st, close quote. Now, with all of this fervor for the situation to be brought under control, we've seen others like blockchain.info and Eric Voorhees also taking steps to delist BSV. Shapeshift should be delisting the network within the next 12 to 24 hours, while blockchain.info is waiting until May 15th. All of this is far from over, and I'm sure it's something that will keep cropping back up over time. I've seen some people upset at the idea that exchanges are playing gatekeeper to the possibility of a network surviving or dying, but this is something we should have learned with the original Bcash fork. It's not the network's actual value proposition that gets exchanges to list it. It's the network of people who have financial backing. Now the greater community has stood up and refuted CSW and Calvin Ayer's position of using traditional methods to silence people in a goal of pushing their agenda. This is antithetical to Bitcoin and crypto in general. All right, well, all the relevant links covering these developments are in the show notes, as well as the links to the legal defense fund for HODLNOT. We are all hodlnot.com. I'm still HODLNOT, and I hope to see him back on Twitter somewhere sometime soon. So since I've written out these notes, there's even been more developments on this, where we've seen CoinDesk make an article where they couldn't determine the situation, and they gave it a real balanced approach. And there's been a Reddit thread discussing CSW's fake cryptographic evidence in the Kleiman case, where he faked a date in the timestamp. And then Mashable, just on Twitter yesterday, brought up CSW's fake PhD from a university there in Australia. So, like I was saying, this thing is far from over, and I'm sure we'll see some more developments coming out of this within the coming weeks, and we'll probably be covering it there too. So, yeah, that's what's been going on with the Satoshi's Vision Network. What do you guys think about all this madness?
Well, I mean, it's really two things I want to bring up. And I guess this first one, I'll just be blunt about it. I mean, it's like really like Peter McCormick, I think when he stepped up and kind of dared Calvin and Craig to sue him, was really just like honestly just a selfish PR move, like just trying to get himself attention. And you know, that said, I think that a lot of the attacks people have been making against him, like Kevin Pham, are just completely uncalled for. And I mean, I say that as somebody who has been very critical of Peter myself, but the things that I was being critical about were his actions in this space and his attitude, what he's producing relevant to this space. And, you know, some people might think that I took that too far with some of the things I did, but it was about what he was actually doing. And like, honestly, the whole thing, it's like, that's what you have to do if you're going to criticize somebody. Like, don't make things personal to a ridiculous degree. Like a lot of the people who've been pretty much attacking him because his mother died and trying to use that as a way to push his buttons. And even I think that is incredibly fucked up. But like that said, I still think that this is very clearly just a PR move to get attention. And I hope that people don't lose sight of that in just blindly getting tribal over this whole dynamic. But that said, as far as the delisting of Bitcoin SV is going, I mean, ethically, I think that it's an exchange's business what they decide to list or delist or allow to be traded on the platform. Like that's like that when you speak about free markets and people's ability to freely choose things for themselves, I mean, that without question is their right. But on a more practical side, I think that this is going to wind up just causing a multitude of problems. I mean, the first of which is obviously like people are already clamoring to delist BCH ABC. And like that's just going to steamroll, I think, until people are just screaming at exchanges to delist every shitcoin that they trade, which is really just absurd. Like they're in the business of facilitating trading things, and that's how they make their revenue. It just doesn't make sense at all to move against that. Like that's their incentive and they're going to follow it. And I think like this whole thing with a Bitcoin SV is just an attempt to garner support and encourage people to like trade at their platform. And I don't think it's really going to steamroll much farther than it already has. Like the exchanges that are considering this, who've already announced this, it's a PR move. It's like, look at us, come trade at our platform. And ultimately, I think it's also going to really start drawing a lot more scrutiny from regulators, just the whole way that it was done. There are a million reasons to delist a Bitcoin SV that have nothing to do with Calvin and Craig acting like litigious assholes. It's insecure. It exposes them to a huge liability based on how much of it's traded on their platform because the network is insecure. I mean, there are 100% purely technical and business reasons to have delisted it, but they very, very clearly and very publicly effectively said that their reasons for delisting it had nothing to do with that in the way that they first broached the topic. And I think that is going to get a lot of attention from regulators who for years now have been claiming that this ecosystem is not regulated enough. It's too Wild West. There's no accountability or consideration for consumer protection. And I think this is ultimately just going to create a lot of negative attention and really create some momentum to push the overall exchange ecosystem in a direction that I don't think a lot of us would like to see it go.
Yeah, I mean, the CTO of BitMEX went into Whalepool, and I saw Whalepool released a couple of videos and on the subject, and they decided to keep BSV because it will, quote, protect their user base. And yeah, I guess it kind of depends on your vision of things, because I mean, if you're wanting to say that, well, my users have value locked up in this network and I don't want to hurt their value by delisting this network, but at the same time, like you're saying, it's insecure, their leaders have been threatening doxing, patent trolling, libel lawsuits. I mean, it's hard to look at the situation and not think that this is antithetical towards their business model of actually building out a greater crypto ecosystem. And, you know, I mean, that's where we're starting to see a pushback on certain levels. And yeah, sure, it's value signaling, but I mean, that's basically what this whole greater ecosystem is people signaling their values and moving to where they think they're more in line. And you know, with the whole Peter McCormick thing, like I get what you're saying in the sense that for sure it's a big, you know, it's a spotlight. But you know, McCormick already has a spotlight, and if he wants to be a martyr to try and out this guy, I'm not going to say it's a bad thing, but you know, I get where you're coming from on that. I think the whole Kevin Pham, Daniel Kratowicz crew, I can't even imagine really what they're thinking in continuing to push this narrative along with Calvin Ayre and Craig Wright. And I don't know, that seems like the more actual selfish position. But yeah, this is it's a situation that I'm sure, like I'm saying, we'll see some developments keep coming out of it. And, you know, it might be the way that exchanges operate. You know, people will be more in tune to understand that they are gatekeepers to networks.
Shinobi, are you saying that exchanges should list coins based on economical reasons and not ideological reasons? So
Yes, their basis for listing or delisting things should be economical and technical. Like that's what their business is. It's trading things. And it should be based on whether they can make money trading things and whether the thing that they're helping be traded exposes them to a risk. Like in Bitcoin SV's case, it's trivial to 51% attack it. Most of the coins on these exchanges that rely on proof of work are trivial to attack, and that creates a liability for them. And like they that's what they are. They're a business. They're out to make money.
So if a shitcoiner goes to an exchange and tells them, I pay you money if you list my coin, then they should accept it if that's the economical reason?
That's up to them. I mean, do they think that any risk of a reorg, like losing them money, is worth it? That's on them. But like the point is, like, look at how a regulator is going to see this. There isn't a rational reason. There isn't a reason about protecting their interest or customer interest. It's just one person involved in something is acting in a way we don't like, so we're going to remove something from this market, which is going to hurt the overall project and anybody invested in it. And just think about how a regulator is going to see that.
So what if I implement a shitcoin into Wasabi and buy into that shitcoin before I implement it and then release it and then I sell it? Is that the right decision? Because that's the economical way of making decisions.
No, it's unethical. But you're missing my point, is that they're drawing bad attention from regulators who are going to say that this is not the appropriate way to handle this market. And like this is going to have bad consequences down the line.
So if you figure out that Bitcoin SV is a centralized sock puppetry and Craig Wright is a fraud, then you should not consider removing that coin?
That's not why they're doing it. They're doing it, and they've publicly stated, because one or two people are suing people. That has nothing to do with the technical security of the network. That has nothing to do with like protecting people invested in it or not. It's just you're suing people and we don't like that. And like that's not going to look good to regulators. It's not.
All right.
I don't know, man. I think I would take a different position and think that the regulators would look at that as self-regulation and, you know, taking appropriate steps to protect consumers, because like the idea of consumer protection on this, like I get it. They're a business and, you know, they're serving an economic model, but that economic model is built off of this idea of a system that can not be bent to the will of traditional frameworks that can actually silence someone. And so I get I think that in their statement, they made it pretty clear that this is not just because of a couple of lawsuits. This is because they stand antithetical to everything that the space represents. And, you know, I mean, like you can speculate on that about the way regulators are going to look at it. But, I mean, you know, Kraken's already stated their sentiment towards regulators. And I think the rest of these exchanges that are doing that too have a similar sentiment.
It's like, it's, you can say that, and they tried to cover their ass there, but it's right out in the open. Like Binance's CEO said, if the suing continues, we'll delist things. Kraken put a poll out. Should we delist it? Yes, it's toxic. These things had nothing to do with market security or like technical shit. So it's, yeah, this is not going to go well in the long term.
For sure, it's going to have developments, and like you're saying, we'll keep following it and update you guys accordingly. But yeah, for all that, where are we going next, man? In this story lineup, my
all right,
froze on me.
So no para, I think you and me are going to have some fun talking about this, but there is a new website that got thrown up after somebody dropped this on the Bitcoin IRC channel called Hooked In. And this is the first actual implementation of a Chaumian Ecash server for Bitcoin. And right now, the whole thing is pretty much only in an alpha beta phase, or alpha phase, sorry, working on testnet. But this is actually being built out. And I do want to say that, you know, this is right now, this is incredibly bare bones. Like this is just the core framework to do something like this. And as somebody who's been thinking about, you know, building out infrastructure and an ecosystem for services like this for a long time, like there is a lot of work left to do. But this is a start. And like, this is the important thing. This is what I've been waiting a very long time for, is something or somebody out there to actually start this. And so pretty much the overall implementation right now is just a server running somewhere, a totally web-based wallet, and no network level privacy right now. So while spending, you know, could in theory be completely anonymous and unconnected, the current implementation as it stands does not actually guarantee those properties. Although, like I said, this is a bare bones alpha stage testnet thing right now. But it's actually using Schnorr signatures to create the coin. And real quick, for those who don't know what a Chaumian Ecash server is, it's pretty much a centralized server that you deposit Bitcoins with, and they actually have you give them a private key that you randomly generated, but you blind it first so that the server can't see what the actual key is. And then it signs that blinded key and gives it back to you. And the way that cryptographic blinding works, you can unblind that signature so that it's a valid signature from the server for the unblinded key. And that effectively becomes a coin. To spend it, you give it to somebody else, and they go to the server and turn it in. And the server gives them a whole new one with a different key. And they exchange the spent coin for an unspent one. And this allows very private, very scalable transacting with cryptographic primitives. And one interesting thing, though, that this implementation is done differently is something I thought about a long time ago, is instead of having the whole setup work with you just giving them a private key, which is effectively a random number, and that key itself being the token, how this setup works is you give them a public key instead of the private key, and it signs that. And then in order to actually spend that coin, you know, you have to take the private key with that public key and make a signature. So instead of just directly giving the key to somebody else to turn in, you give them the public key with the signature on the public key from the server, and sign that with the private key. And so this way, the server can actually prove that this was legitimately spent. It can't just, you know, somehow get a copy of that key because it's a public key and then claim something is spent when it's not. And when you spend it, there's that proof in the signature that you, the owner of the token, actually spent it. And so this helps a lot with, you know, trying to audit the server and prove that it's operating honestly. And also, an interesting thing is the way that this setup works with Schnorr signatures. This would actually allow a multi-signature token. So you, even though this is a totally centralized thing with a server effectively issuing its own Bitcoin-backed tokens, because it's Schnorr signatures, the way that the public-private key setup and the signature dynamic works, you could actually create a token that requires multiple signatures to be spent. And so even though it's totally centralized, you can still have that multi-sig setup where you distribute control over these tokens between multiple people. And I think that's a very interesting and very valuable, you know, setup moving forward as far as like what you can do on this layer, even though it can be far removed from the main chain and centralized. You can still have that kind of security model. And, you know, right now that this is pretty much only something that works on chain as far as the descriptions and setup of the server. And it actually has a system where you can generate addresses for deposits in a way where you can prove that you have made a deposit. And again, this is kind of a implementation detail specific to this from what I know that tries to move towards giving more ways to audit the server and hold it accountable so that people can publicly prove the deposits were made, that somebody made them, and so on and so forth. And as far as the denominations, they're actually made in powers of 2. So like the smallest coin is a Satoshi. The next one is 2 Satoshis, and then 4 Satoshis and 8 Satoshis. And this is, you know, counterintuitive to people used to working in powers of 10 in terms of money. You know, we have like the $1 bill, the 5, the 10, the 20, the 100, so on. But it's a lot more efficient in terms of being able to represent different sizes of money. It requires a lot less different denominations of notes to represent very small amounts of Bitcoin and very large amounts of Bitcoin, with the largest being like 10.7 BTC or something around there. And, you know, this is just, like I said, you know, this is an alpha stage thing and very bare bones with a lot of work to do, especially in terms of different protocols and standards on the user side to just make the user experience seamless and move away from requiring a web-based wallet to interact with this. But like it's, the important thing in my mind is it's here now. Somebody is actually building it. And as time goes on, like this can be iterated on very quickly. People can, you know, learn from how this is done, develop new ideas or ways to structure things. And, you know, just like Lightning, this has nothing to do with the consensus layer of Bitcoin. It's something that just gets plugged on top. So the progress for something like this can happen way faster than actual changes to the core layer of Bitcoin itself. And this is, you know, something that offers a very, very high degree of scalability and privacy in one. And, you know, I think and I have thought for years now, a very important tool in terms of scaling Bitcoin. And it's fucking here. So no para, come on, let's geek out.
So what I really liked in it is the style of the author. I mean, he's putting this technical blah blah there and making jokes about it. I think that was amazing. But yeah, it's very early now. Do you know who's doing this?
I think that there handle on IRC was Riper K, but I forget the person's actual name right now, and I'm honestly not sure if it's something they publicly put out there. But so yeah, I guess no, really.
And did you find the source code?
No, actually, I tried to dig around for that really quickly last night, but I wasn't able to. And honestly, I probably would have needed more time than you to really dig through it.
No, I was trying to find it too, but I didn't see that either. But anyway, I'm really curious what's going to come out of this. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think really the two big things I think I want to see progress on is like the network level of privacy and really trying to build things in a way to make that as solid as possible. And then, or sorry, you can go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that he's probably listening. So make your words, your recommendations very conscious.
Well, I just mean like something like Tor or I2P, like some way of disconnecting a consistent identity from the wallet to the server so that things are not, easily connectable from the server's point of view. And then also just like user side protocols. Like this is going to need a whole user experience and like the protocols to really support that, like a seamless way to actually transact these and how to handle that, like not just copy and pasting a hex string with all the keys and signatures of a token, but like, encoding that in a QR code so that somebody else can scan it, or NFC support so that people can, just tap their phone and pay, but like something to really facilitate this being a very neat user experience. Because I think like one of the biggest benefits in terms of user experience with a Chaumian server is just how simple it is. It's just that the token, which is a key and the signatures, and just giving it to somebody and them going to the server and going, here, this is, give me a new one. Like you don't have to scan the network. You don't have to watch the chain to see if your outputs have been changed, if some channel was closed while you were offline. Like you don't have to worry about any of the overhead that everything interacting with actual Bitcoins comes with in terms of making sure that you are up to date with the state of the network. It's just, here's a piece of data and you give it to somebody and that's it. And you don't have to constantly check that this data is still valid. If the server is being honest, it's valid. You just give it to somebody and that's it. And I think like that solves a big, series of problems with user experience.
So I have one recommendation for the guy to change to RSA from Schnorr, because there are some attacks with Schnorr blinding that's probably happening in this kind of setup. We had to pay very conscious attention to change our keys every time, and only give a very small amount of time to users to collect to collect the signatures, the blinded signatures, because if you get a bunch of blinded signatures, then it becomes easier and easier to, I'm not quite sure what, but either get back the private key or constitute fake proofs, and none of them are good. Yeah, so multiple signatures are not good with Schnorr, so pay attention to that.
Well, I think this is something they'll work out, and honestly, I would like him to stick with Schnorr signatures, just because like this is a way better scheme. It provides a lot more functionality, and like also, I think I might be wrong. It was Christian Decker from Blockstream who's actually been working on the use of Schnorr signatures for things like Ecash tokens in a way so that withdrawing, Jonas Nick, but so that like a withdrawal or a deposit from a Chaumian server or something like it could be atomic, like moving it over Lightning Network or on chain, like your money arrives and that happening gives you a valid token, or like vice versa, like you give the token and the withdrawal atomically completes. And I think like that would be a huge, like that would be a killer development in a service like this, because that's one of the key pain points is like, how do you guarantee that when you give the server real money that it gives you a valid token, and vice versa, like when you give them a token, how do you guarantee they actually process your withdrawal? And I think having, an adapter signature based atomic swap there, like that just solves this issue. And so like I would rather see this person stick with Schnorr signatures and try to build on that and work out any kind of flaws with it so that things like that are doable in the future.
Yeah, I agree. This is why we changed from RSA to Schnorr in Wasabi. But really, just pay attention. Yeah, you are right. He should look at Jonas Nick's work, because he actually came up with something. I'm not quite sure what, but he came up with something to mitigate this issue. But anyway, it's a proof of concept for now until it's the testnet. But it can, if something doesn't get broken on the testnet, then you deploy it to the mainnet, so people have incentive to break it, and that's not a good solution. Anyway, just pay attention to contact Jonas Nick. He knows this stuff. Peter Willie was talking about this too. Anyway, just change the keys or make sure you don't give out too many signatures to users, things like that.
But I mean, it's like this. It's going to be fucking awesome. But I don't know, unless Rick or Janine have anything to say on this one. Should we move on?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's like you're saying. I mean, it's good to see this thing being built out, and we got another scaling solution out the door where something can help build out Bitcoin privacy and fungibility. Just good to see, and hope everything gets built out in a positive direction that keeps those things going forward.
All right, I guess then, Janine, you ready to take us into the next one?
Yeah. So, as you all know, this has been an absolutely crazy week outside of Bitcoin. In case some of you didn't notice, we had that intermediary episode between 171 and 172 on Thursday, which was a extra 1 hour live stream because on the morning of April 11th, Julian Assange was carried out of the Ecuadorian embassy in London by UK law enforcement and is currently sitting in Belmarsh, which is a high security prison in the UK nicknamed British Gitmo, not unearned. And my way of coping with that news was to write a 2,000 plus word summary of the events that have transpired on that day and the days following it, and the relevant backstory as well. Some of it we already discussed in 171.5, but I want to mention a couple of key events that have happened since his arrest. One of the things that I noticed when I was looking at the indictment from the Injustice Department that they unsealed is that one of the prosecuting attorneys is a Kellen S. Dwyer. Who remembers our friendly neighborhood jackboot Dwyer? Kellen Dwyer, ironically, was the guy who accidentally leaked the existence of the sealed indictment against Assange in November 2018 when he was copy-pasting from it into another document, an unrelated case, and then forgot to remove Assange's name. So he became our accidental whistleblower of the year. Also, the indictment is noted as having been filed on March 8th, 2018, which is literally right before they would have been able to, or right before they wouldn't have been able to file it at all, because there was an 8-year statute of limitations on the charge, which would have expired on, But no, actually, the indictment was from March 6th, and the statute of limitations expired on March 8th, so like right before. So talk about procrastination. Too bad they didn't take it all the way. Also, the affidavit that was submitted by an FBI agent supporting the arrest of Assange by the United States is signed by a Teresa Buchanan, who remembers our friendly neighborhood jackboot number 2. Buchanan is actually the same judge who authorized the controversial D order against WikiLeaks staff, volunteers, and partners for their Twitter data in December 2010, and that was revealed through a Freedom of Information request in 2015. Now, in response to the unsealing of the indictment, Manning's legal team filed a memorandum reply brief, and I've quoted some of the key areas from that because it's pretty spicy. They say the issue to be preserved was whether the subpoena or questioning was an abuse of grand jury power. Ms. Manning raised and preserved the issue of grand jury abuse in each hearing and referred clearly to the issue of using repetitious questioning to undermine witness credibility, a strategy clearly relevant only to a prosecutor who is preparing for trial. Given the Assange indictment, there is now literally no doubt whatsoever that this concern, raised multiple times, was grounded in fact and was sufficient to have rebutted the presumption of grand jury regularity. The district court did not take this into account when deciding whether closure of the courtroom was required, and the finding of contempt should be reversed. So basically what happened is that Chelsea Manning defended her choice to not participate in the grand jury by saying that, you know, she didn't have access to all the information about why they were even needing to question her again after she had already testified years ago. And she also objected to the secrecy of the grand jury process. And, you know, they basically said, oh, your concerns aren't valid. You know, this is what, like, they almost basically said she was crazy for, like, disputing whether this process was just or whether they were hiding something. And, oh, look, it turns out they're the crazy ones. They're the assholes. And she's still in prison. So this is basically a request from her legal team to say, you are a bunch of assholes and you better release her because she was right. Again, back to Assange, 2 of his doctors that actually managed to visit him while he was in the embassy have spoken out against the really despicable smear campaign that Ecuador has launched to not only attempt to justify their illegal behavior regarding him, but also from President Moreno's own scandal that is currently under congressional investigation in Ecuador and is causing a bunch of national protests in his country. Dr. Sean Love, one of the physicians, said that he never did witness Assange having poor hygiene or discourteous behavior towards embassy staff. His suffering was readily apparent, yet he was always pleasant and professional, which are admirable characteristics under extreme and punitive circumstances. Dr. Sandra Crosby, who is a Boston University associate professor with expertise in the physical and psychological impact of torture, has also been evaluating Assange since 2017, and she submitted an affidavit to the United Nations Commission on Human Rights and the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, and sent a letter to the Council of Europe's Commission for Human Rights, requesting that their office look into this case and explore avenues to resolve the current dilemma, which encompasses multiple human rights issues. And her testimony is very thorough and compassionate, specifically regarding the breaches of doctor-patient confidentiality, just like Jen Robinson was talking about the breaches of lawyer-client confidentiality that were committed by Ecuadorian staff. So I definitely recommend reading that. Then on April 13th, Ecuador's National Human Rights Institution, which is related to the UN, declared that Assange's rights to nationality, asylum, the principle of non-refoulement, and guarantees of due process were all violated. They also said that since Ecuador did not prove that the reasons for Assange's asylum, threats to his life and liberty, have gone away, then the state did not only fail to go through the proper procedure for annulling Assange's naturalization, but they would also be violating Article 79 of the Ecuadorian Constitution, which prohibits the extradition of Ecuadorian citizens. They write in Spanish, faced with this situation, the ombudsman regrets that the Ecuadorian state's decision could incur international responsibility and set a worrying precedent regarding the protection of people in situations of asylum and or Ecuadorians abroad. Then on April 14th, an article by Alicia Castro, who is a former Argentinian ambassador in the UK, published an article about how she met Assange and some of her many visits to the embassy. This is available in both Spanish and English. It was translated. The English translation says, "The last time I visited him, his situation was worrisome. He was being spied on and had a ribbon hanging from his neck with a series of pen drives," which is another name for USB flash drives. We talked in the dining room around that table where we met for the first time, raising the radio and writing part of what he wanted to say, exchanging notebooks and covering our heads to avoid cameras and microphones. He would never give up. Then probably the most exciting response of all came from Anne Ramberg, who is the general secretary of the Swedish Bar Association, which is like the equivalent of the American Bar Association in the United States. And so she blogged about her thoughts on the case, and she ended the blog with the following sentiment, which was written in Swedish, but it's been translated also. She said, "Let us not forget, whatever we may think of Assange or the deeds that he is suspected of, this is about much more. It is about freedom of speech and the rule of law. It is ultimately about the rights and the moral obligation to reveal war crimes. Assange and WikiLeaks did this. The revelations about US abuse were necessary and extremely urgent. Should we extradite someone to Hitler's Germany who revealed the existence of concentration camps and genocide, no matter how this knowledge was acquired? I don't think so." So that is pretty amazing, basically calling the US Hitler Germany. And then just yesterday, it was announced that Assange won an award for journalists, whistleblowers, and defenders of the right to information, which was created in honor of a Maltese journalist who was murdered in 2017. Obviously, he couldn't be there because he was in prison. Actually, there's 3 people who won this award, and 2 of the 3 were in prison. So that tells you about the state of whistleblowing in the world. In fact, the only one who was there was actually a whistleblower for Nestle, due to the absolutely terrible conditions of whistleblower protection in Switzerland. Imagine that. Like, Switzerland pretends to be, a bastion of human rights and best standards, and yet they still have whistleblower problems. So because he wasn't there, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, I think she won it in the 1970s, Mary Maguire, accepted it on his behalf, and she also has nominated Assange for the Nobel Peace Prize in January. Unlikely that'll be accepted because, as you can see, people like Obama get awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, but people who actually contribute to peace probably won't be winning it very much anymore. Unfortunately, Assange was not the only person to be arrested on April 11th. A Swedish software developer named Ola Bini, who was living in Ecuador since 2013, was tweeting about how he was due to fly to Japan that day. And then he was falsely detained at the Quito airport by Ecuadorian police under an arrest warrant that had the wrong fucking person's name on it. They were looking for a Russian, but when neither the name or the nationality matched the arrest warrant, like any typical corrupt state, they simply just rewrote his name on it and then detained him anyway for more than 24 hours without allowing him to speak with any legal counsel. I think they even made him sleep outside while they were detaining him, and which is all very illegal, and he will apparently be detained for a further 90 days leading up to his trial, and his bank accounts have already been frozen, as has proudly been declared by the Ecuadorian state on social media. So maybe you're wondering, well, what are the charges? According to the Interior Minister, he was part of a, quote, black ring, a blackmail ring, that in the recent days had threatened to retaliate against President Lenin Moreno and to destabilize the Ecuadorian government. Now, what is their evidence for this? Again, they so proudly posted their evidence on social media, and their evidence is apparently that he owns a bunch of technical books, he owns multiple electronic devices and USB drives, and is a known supporter of WikiLeaks. Oh, and he travels a lot. That's like a big no-no, big red flag. That's all of their evidence. And so obviously this is a very stupid situation. And it's clearly done, like they're claiming he wanted to retaliate. Well, this is clearly in retaliation to Julian Assange. Like, obviously, because they were arrested on the same day, and it has to do with WikiLeaks. And so Renata Villa, a Guatemalan human rights lawyer, described the arrest as arbitrary and abusive, and there's currently a petition collecting signatures to demand that he be released immediately. You can find that, I believe there's an account now, Free Ola Bini. You can find that in the article that's linked in the description. And so now we get on to kind of a second topic, but I kind of combine them because they're a bit related. So the Financial Times reports that the IMF and the World Bank will be launching their own blockchain digital currency for the purpose of familiarizing their staff with the concepts. Breaker Mag writes, the currency will only be accessible within the organizations and will not be able to buy real world goods and services. But as a model digital currency economy, it will operate as a kind of trial run. Staff will earn the tokens by achieving training goals, then exchange their earnings for rewards of some kind. The tokens will be accessed on an app called Learning Coin to emphasize its educational use, and the app will also support the institution's blogs, research, and video content. But at the end of the day, I don't really give a shit about what kind of stupid shit coin the IMF is trying to make, because it doesn't matter to anyone. So let's talk about what the IMF does and how that may have influenced the arrest of Julian Assange this week. If you haven't read the WikiLeaks files, I highly recommend it, because it basically predicted how the geopolitical forces of the United States and the IMF on Ecuador and other South American countries basically made their decision a bit inevitable when you have a president like Moreno who is more than willing to be America's bitch. Within the first chapters of the book, they talk about the use of IMF loans to basically put these countries into debt slavery. So, quoting from the book, rather than encouraging state-coordinated development of industry, the IMF pursued structural adjustment using debt as a mechanism to incorporate Latin American states into the global economy. International banks have lent copiously to South American dictatorships during the 1970s, leaving them vulnerable to U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker's decision to drive up interest rates. Very soon, most Latin American export income was consumed by debt repayments, leaving the region dependent on bailouts from the IMF. Such programs were notorious for the effects that they have on national economies and for the nature of dependency they generate between debtors and creditors, in short, debt bondage. There is also, outside of the WikiLeaks files book, there's a document called Unconventional Warfare, which was developed by U.S. Army Special Operations Forces, or AIRSOF, in 2008. And in Chapter 2, they state the following. This is a very long paragraph, but it's very important to understand what exactly the IMF does. So they say Special Operations Forces understand that they can and should exploit the active and analytical capabilities existing in the financial instruments of U.S. power in the conduct of unconventional warfare. Financial incentives and disincentives can build and sustain international coalitions waging or supporting U.S. campaigns. As part of an interagency effort, the U.S. Treasury can recommend changes to U.S. policy that can provide such incentives to state governments and others at a national strategic policy level. Participation in international financial organizations, such as the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and the Bank for International Settlements, offers the U.S. diplomatic financial venues to accomplish such coalitions. Like all other instruments of U.S. national power, the use and effects of financial weapons are interrelated, and they must be coordinated carefully. Once again, Special Operations Forces must work with the Department of State and intelligence community to determine which elements of human terrain in the unconventional warfare area are most susceptible to financial engagement and what second and third order effects are likely from such engagement. So yeah, we talked about the role of the IMF and the loan that they just gave to Ecuador just coincidentally before, Assange got arrested. And so I think it's pretty undeniable at this point that was, there was a reported meeting directly between Mueller and President Moreno discussing Assange, and they claim that no, that was never explicitly a part of the deal, but come on, you don't get in the New York Times, and that doesn't get mentioned in the New York Times without there being some fire behind the smoke. So yeah, I'm still pretty upset about all of this. But the one thing that I'm really happy about is that so many different people from not only the Ecuadorian government and the Swedish government and even the US government, but a bunch of organizations have basically stepped up, and individuals as well. They've stepped up in the last week to say, you know, this will not happen. We're not going to let this happen, and you better let go of these people or you're going to face the consequences. And I know a bunch of people who really want to make them face the consequences if they try anything further beyond the already insanely illegal actions that they've taken in multiple countries.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the developments on this story are also going to be one of those that keeps on rolling for a lot longer than all the BSV drama, for sure. I mean, this has got a lot to do with geopolitics and the right to free speech and the right to a free press. And like you're saying, I mean, we've seen a lot of people within powerful organizations of countries that might not exactly have the sentiment they do, but they do stand up and say the right thing, like with that woman you mentioned from the Swedish Bar Association. I think she hit the nail on the head as far as saying, like, you know, whoever brought out information from the concentration camps, would we, you know, put them in the same position? And I don't think that would be right. And it's just a sign of a different time that we live in. I mean, you know, this entity is sort of struggling about trying to figure out how exactly it can survive in this new age of asymmetric information, where it's really hard to control the flow of it. And, you know, that's the way they do it, mainly is through, you know, big loans to big countries. And, you know, it's a lot of different powerful organizations and powerful people. I mean, I know that I've seen Tulsi Gabbard step up and say the right thing here in the United States about how Julian Assange was doing nothing more than journalism. And that, you know, this just really kind of shows the state that we're in, you know, not just the country in general, but mainly journalism in the Western world and the way that it works. And for sure, I think, yeah, it's all pretty crazy to follow, and it's upsetting to see, because it surely represents a bigger dynamic power play that has some pretty strong consequences.
Yeah, and particularly Sweden, that's going to be a whole giant mess, because, you know, you have a bunch of these MPs in the UK who apparently made this whole document saying, you know, we demand that Assange not be given to the United States and he should go to Sweden to face justice in Sweden. Well, the bitty problem with that is that reportedly Marianne Nee, who was the prosecutor for that case, destroyed the case file after she closed the preliminary investigation in 2017. That's a bit of a problem. Now, why would she destroy it? I mean, there's a couple of explanations, but the most likely one is because she had basically embarrassed the Swedish justice system, as pointed out by a number of people in the Swedish legal system. And so she was probably really embarrassed by the fact that she not only handled it really poorly, but that it would probably be a giant red mark on her career for the rest of her career, if she has one. And so she destroyed it. So if the case reopens, they're going to have to start from scratch all over again. If that is, I don't even know if that's possible under the Swedish justice system. But there is no case to be had in Sweden right now, which is why the statement from the Swedish Public Prosecution Office was, we don't know if this case will be reopened, if it's opened at all. And so, yeah, that's quite interesting from Sweden's point of view. Now, I want to, before I end this part, I want to give a special shout out to U.S. Senator Joe Manchin, who was quoted by, I think it was CNN, as saying that Assange is our property. And I just want to say, fuck you, dude. That's like, we've already talked about debt slavery. That's actually deliberate, that like calling a human being property, that's slavery. I'm sorry. So go fuck yourself. And believe me, there are a bunch of people who will make sure that you will never, ever see this guy. You will not get what you want. He is not your property. He's not anyone's property, because some of us have rejected state slavery, and that's not going to go away.
Yeah, that's that is a crazy statement. And yeah, for sure. It's just it shows how bad these organizations have fallen over time. And just, I know that this is a big story, and like I'm saying, we'll bring it back up. I know we will. It's going to keep coming back around. And so just in the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving us along to another organization that has also fallen far. So, all right, well, we passed the April deadline for the Coinbase Shift card, and now users of the platform can no longer make purchases of use or use the ATM with the debit card in Bitcoin. Of course, Conbase had something up their sleeve awaiting the departure of the popular debit card. Just announced last week, Conbase released the new crypto card called Coinbase Card, currently only available in the UK. So what's the major difference between the two cards? Well, on this one, Conbase has built out the Coinbase Card app that works in coordination with the card to where users can choose to spend any crypto that's offered on their platform. So it's no surprise really to hear that Conbase continues to push cons towards their upper bounds by building out development on those networks as opposed to the one that got them to their multi-billion-dollar position. Anyway, Conbase is giving away 1,000 cards, and now the privilege to spend your Ethereum in the UK will cost you £5. And yeah, for right now, it's strictly limited to the United Kingdom, but they have plans to move into European countries in the coming months. I really don't know how many more developments we can cover when it comes to Coinbase, considering their proclivity to keep pushing nothing but alts all over the place. The Shift card was one of the last things that Bitcoiners in the US held for convenience to spend on the network that gave Coinbase their value. It's crazy to see how far they've fallen from their position a few years ago, but what can we do other than keep informing people of the flaws within that system? I mean, just put another feeler out there, Jack. We need you to enable deposits for the Cash App, man, for Bitcoiners here in the U.S. We need that ability. I think that that was one of the great things about being able to hold Bitcoin and spend Bitcoin and be able to use it on both ends from a store value and a medium of exchange for when things got tight. So, yeah, I mean, not much of a development here, just, bringing out what Conbase is up to. But like I'm saying, I don't know how much more we can cover this. What do you guys think of this? I know you got something, Shinobi.
Well, I just wanted to say, fuck you, Coinbase, because the way this all played out, it is unbelievably clear that the reason Shift shut down is because Coinbase cut them off from their services so they could magically launch a new debit card the second that fucking Shift hit their shutdown deadline. You can go fuck yourself. I'm going to try and figure something else out, but I'm not registering. I'm not getting that card. You can go fuck yourself. I had a product that worked, and you manipulatively cut them off to start your own version, and I'm not going to use it. Fuck you.
Right on. That's about the same sentiment I had. I was kind of writing these notes up last night, and I was wondering, like, would you be tempted to do that sort of thing? Because it is really, I think it's an important thing that there is some sort of debit card that Bitcoiners can use for, I mean, like, really, this is the bottom of the barrel Bitcoiners. I mean, this is the way I got into it. Was I didn't even have a savings, but the only thing that gave me the confidence to actually start investing in Bitcoin and learning more about the system was the fact that I knew I could get a Trezor and the Shift card, and between the two, I could store my Bitcoin safely and spend it if things got necessary. Because when you're working with, like, your bread is what you earn, and you're barely squeaking out a savings to start investing in Bitcoin. This is one of the major things that helps that process move forward. So, yeah, I know Jack and Cash App guys have been doing a lot for Bitcoin on, and I mean, like, it would just be a really big thing for Bitcoiners if they could, still have that along with them. So, yeah, let's, like you're saying, not a big story here. So, yeah, let's just keep sliding along. Where are we going from here?
Well, just a quick update before we slide along and do a bigger one. This year, Gemini completely redid all of their wallet infrastructure, kind of both to incorporate other currencies they've started listing, as well as optimize a lot of the Bitcoin functionality, such as introducing SegWit, as well as batching optimizations to try to be as efficient as possible with their use of the network. and they've actually become the first exchange to use native BEC32 SegWit. And so they put out kind of just a short blog post patting themselves on the back for this, and they've started encouraging their users to switch over to using BEC32 native SegWit, given that the the overall support in the ecosystem is really getting there. Like I know there's some out there that still can't handle sending to or recognizing BEC32 addresses, but most of the major wallets can. Bitcoin J not too long ago integrated support, so most are going to follow. And really at this point, there's no reason to not be using one, given that it's not the same as it was when the fork first activated and almost no software supported it. So a lot of those compatibility issues are pretty much a thing of the past or soon to be. And so I was actually. I really don't know what to think about Gemini overall, but it was nice to see them kind of trying to nudge users towards that instead of just ignoring it or taking a halfway step with pay to script hash. But it is what it is. So I guess if there's no comments on that, should we have along to the fun?
Yeah, man. What's this Ready Player Bitcoin going on, man? I saw this message from space. It's pretty interesting. What's going on?
So somebody, couple, I think 2 days ago now, put out a message over the Blockstream satellite link and announced a treasure hunt. And so, there's a few things that this really made me think of. Obviously, like this Ready Player One, but This also kind of in a way reminds me of the Cicada 3031, if anybody knows what that is. And it's really this like very mysterious event that gets set up every year, a few years, by pretty much a completely unknown person or group of people with a lot of urban legends surrounding it. But it's a long series of clues pretty much in a cryptographic treasure hunt to really an unknown end in Cicada's case. But in the case of this Satoshi's treasure hunt, it's towards assembling a key to an address with $1 million USD worth of Bitcoin. And so pretty much whoever set this up took a key to that address and sharded it into 1,000 different pieces using Shamir's secret sharing technique, and set it up in a way where with 400 of these pieces, you can actually reassemble the key and claim these coins. And they've set up a website as well as there's a map floating around that's collected all of the GPS coordinates in the initial message, but they're pretty much setting up clues all over the world at different GPS coordinates that are going to slowly be unveiled over time to reveal shards of this private key. And there's really no indication of how long this is going to go on or really how far into interesting territory different puzzles are going to get. But initially, the fragments of the keys were revealed. I think it's from my time zone. It was yesterday, I think, but UTC, it was the 17th. And so far, the first 3 keys have been recovered, not keys, but fragments of keys have been recovered. And it's pretty much, it's a very interesting little puzzle actually displayed on the website, where so far it delivers an encrypted blob to your browser with a passphrase required to decrypt it. And the initial key that was discovered was actually found on a QR code at all the locations that this has been set up, with the word orbital going along with the QR code. And pages have started appearing at the domain, K1, K2, K3. And Orbital turned out to be the password for the initial page, which revealed the actual first key shard. And I think that this just goes to show really how the next two were unveiled, you know, really how you have to attack something like this. And it's really not so much a challenge of solving the specific problems laid out, but identifying problems you can solve in the first place, because these next two key shards weren't actually found by acquiring clues in the real world. One of the persons who found the initial one actually just went in the browser and went, oh, is K2 there? It is. And K3, and then noticed K4 has not actually gone live on the site yet. And he pretty much just wrote a simple Ruby script, and given that the password of the initial page was Orbital, grabbed an English dictionary and grabbed the encrypted blob out of the browser and pretty much just ran a dictionary attack and brute forced the next two pages, which turned out to have the passwords of Cosmos and Black Hole. And so, you know, I wouldn't call it cheating, but he kind of acquired these key shards before any actual clue was put in the real world and kind of cut ahead of everything. And you know, this I think it's going to be a really interesting and fun thing to follow, because in the initial message, he's kind of said that, you know, some of these things will require moving to a specific location, some performing a feat of strength, as was said, or solving a puzzle. And it's really, I'm interested to see how far whoever's doing this goes in terms of, you know, how weird or challenging different puzzles are going to get. But, you know, if you want to dive into this, I mean, if you can do so without spending money flying all over the world, it's be a fun thing to do. And if you get there first, there's $1 million worth of Bitcoin in it.
Yeah, man. I mean, like I said, I saw this tweet come out from Grubels about the message coming in from the satellite, and I looked into it, and yeah, it does look like it could be a fun thing to follow along and watch. And I mean, there's not really a you know, a series like there is with the whole, I don't even know what series is called, like The Great Race or something. You know, there's like these television game shows where this feels like it's like making it in from the Bitcoin world, where, you know, we'll never see it on TV other than maybe some secondary reporting after somebody won $1 million following a series of clues and math problems, and just, you know, trying to figure out a way to get that money. And it's always interesting, man. I mean, like, you know, Bitcoin and the way that it kind of shapes your reality. And, you know, this is like the ultimate of that, where it's like, okay, I'm going to try and win $1 million and, you know, spend a lot of my time trying to hash out these problems. And, you know, there's going to definitely be some people doing that, and it'll be fun to follow along for sure.
I think it's really fun. I have a note where I collect all the ideas I want to do after I leave Wasabi, and I put this one in too.
Nice.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, the original notes, he said this isn't going to be the last one of these puzzles he does. So, you know, it's going to be fun to watch, you know, how this plays out. But if we can take whoever did this at their word, I think this might be, you know, something that gets done every year, a few years or something, for a while to see.
All right, man. So, yeah, that's going to be fun to follow along, man. So, what's going on with India?
Yeah, so the National Payments Corporation of India is considering blockchain technology to strengthen digital transactions in the country. Shocking given their attitude towards the overall space for the past year or so. But the NPCI is pretty much a organization with a number, I think like 56 member banks as stakeholders all across India, and they run a lot of payment and settlement systems in kind of a loose partnership with the Reserve Bank of India. And it's really interesting, I think, the kind of overall reason cited for doing this, and it's pretty much PwC, a large financial firm, claiming that India would be one of the world's blockchain leaders by 2023, which honestly I don't see happening if their attitude continues in the direction it's been going in lately, and actually stomping out valuable public systems and trying to make them illegal, as opposed to taking a sensible approach to these things. But the NPCI has previously built out a system called a Unified Payments Interface, which is really kind of catching on and seeing a lot of growth all across India. And it's a kind of a unified system for bank wire transfers that when you really look at how it's structured, it's got me at least scratching my head and wondering how the fuck a blockchain is going to actually help anything over there when they have this system. It's pretty much something anybody can connect a bank account to through a number of different ways and just seamlessly transact in wires directly through a smartphone app. And it's as simple as using a payment address that can be acquired from the app, a mobile number which is linked to your account, your actual account number, even your Aadhaar number, your biometric ID number can be used as the way to address a payment through this wire system. And they even have QR code supports, which can encode any of these different mechanisms for addressing a payment through this system. And so, given the fact that they literally rolled out a biometric nationwide ID system, and they have conventional fintech systems like the Unified Payments Interface, which has a very seamless looking interface and user experience that can just use bank transfers to facilitate digital payments. Like, what the hell is a blockchain going to help with? Like, how does that change anything? Like this, it's like analogous to the same kind of situation going on in China with WePay or WeChat Pay used everywhere. And like a huge amount of the population already used to just scanning QR codes to make digital payments. Like, how does a blockchain in any way add any kind of value to this kind of thing? You're not trying to make a new currency. You're not trying to insulate a monetary policy from manipulation. So what the fuck do you need a blockchain for? You already have a system that users can interact with to make quick, seamless digital payments. How does a blockchain help with that? You've already built the system that solves the issues you're trying to solve. Quick digital payments. So it's really like, what the fuck are they thinking?
I believe that Andreas was recently quoted as saying, "That's not a blockchain, that's a series of poor engineering decisions." And that's how I would respond to this.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, some things in there that is going to make this easy, but for sure it sounds like an easy way to shut people down. This is, like you're saying, I mean, we've seen it with WePay and, Apple Pay and all these different, solutions that are really centralized to make digital payments really easy. It is like one of the vectors where it's just like, if they can onboard all those people, then it's like, telling them to move over to a system like Bitcoin. I mean, it's still, you got to get to the fundamental level, but there was that this is like the easiest way to do things because there's like finality and settlement like instantly, and now with Lightning Network, or it could take 30 minutes to an hour. I mean, it all kind of depends on, it's just like an understanding of the system, but this is just going to make it to where people are like, well, I mean, we've already got these solutions and they work, but I mean, it's like, are they really going to grasp the underlying effects that that'll have with their ability to transact if someone in these positions that run these systems don't like what they're doing?
I think it's stupid. Let's move on to the next question. Next topic. What's going on?
But stupid. That's what I like. I get to yell at it and call people stupid.
Nice.
All right. So then, yeah, like what's going on with some people in Congress trying to figure out what's going on with this stupid tax situation?
Yeah. So, hello, fellow tax slaves in the United States. Hope you enjoyed your tax day. Another thing that happened on, coincidentally, April 11th, when Congress isn't wasting your money expensing personal trips to the Caribbean or persecuting whistleblowers, several members of Congress that Coin Center has been working with sent a letter to the IRS asking for better guidance on cryptocurrency taxes. Representative Tom Emmer said that while initial guidance was provided, ambiguity around basic questions of how taxpayers should calculate and track the basis of their virtual currency holdings is unacceptable. According to a recent report from Coin Center, the 2014 guidance by the IRS failed to address fundamental tax questions, and repeated requests to the IRS for additional clarity have been made by a variety of entities. It also indicates that rather than providing clarity, the IRS has instead increased enforcement activities against taxpayers who, quote, misreport their cryptocurrency transactions. And the questions that they marked as being urgent in the letter are as follows. Number one is acceptable methods for calculating the cost basis of virtual currencies. Which specific methods does the IRS consider to constitute a reasonable manner that is consistently applied as required by Notice 2014-21? The second one is acceptable methods of cost basis assignment and loss relief. Lot relief? Or it's supposed to be lost relief. I've never heard of lot relief for virtual currencies. Do taxpayers need to use specific identification whenever they spend or exchange virtual currency, or are other methods such as first in, first out, or average cost basis acceptable as well? The tax treatment of forks. Number three is the tax treatment of forks for taxpayers that use virtual currencies, such as the 2017 hard fork of the Bitcoin blockchain. And so at the end of the letter, they say that they request a response from the IRS by May 15th, 2019, which is just under a month away. So, yeah, I mean, either way, you're fucked, but maybe you'll be less fucked if the IRS is like, oh, we should actually tell people what we want instead of not telling them and then putting them in prison for not following the rules that we never told them about. So, yeah.
And lot relief it's pretty much just like how to classify like things you purchased. Like let's say like I buy 1 Bitcoin like last month and then half of one like this month. Those are like 2 different lots, and you pretty much have to treat them differently. And so like that goes into like the last in, last out, or first in, first out, and like how you actually like classify your gains and losses on each like lot of an asset that you bought. But that said, I don't know. I really am in complete agreement with these congressmen. Like, this is completely fucking absurd. The IRS, it just gives vague nonsense and then just starts auditing people without any kind of clarification. Like, if you're going to try and tax me, then you give me clear fucking rules as to what I'm supposed to pay for, how I'm supposed to record it, or go fuck yourself.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, we need some sort of guidance here in the U.S. when it comes to these assets, because there's a lot of people involved now. And like we're saying with the IRS, I mean, they basically had this like hands-off approach, and then, it's hands-on, handcuffs on. And that's definitely a thing of the past. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, kind of comes in with this whole separation of actual accountability in banking and government oversight of finances and everything. I mean, that whole, side of like tax collection, IRS, like that agency has pretty much just become like a strong bully arm.
Yeah, so as a person, I don't use Bitcoin for spending really because of this whole situation that's completely messed up with taxes. So for anyone who does actually use it for spending and such, my suggestion would be to be a pain in their ass and over-report because, I mean, it's the case outside of the US as well. If they come after you, like, the best thing you can do is give them as much information as possible so that they can't, like, I mean, they'll just have to sift through it, and eventually they'll do, a risk analysis and say, okay, it'll cost this much for us to actually evaluate all this information. And this is how much we expect to get from this person if we actually find any discrepancies. And if they find that the cost of going through all the data is higher than what they expect to get from you, then they'll just give up. And that's a great strategy. So I suggest that if you do that, you should report as much as possible in a way that is most likely to aggravate their system.
For sure, that's a way to get them aggravated.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, unless you are a huge whale or making large value transfers regularly, they're not going to prioritize auditing somebody who spent a Bitcoin over the course of a year on stupid shit. Like it's a cost benefit analysis.
And there still is like legislation in the works within the states. I mean, I know here locally with Colorado, they're still trying to pass the Cryptocurrency Tax Fairness Act. So, yeah, I mean, like it would be good to get this overall guidance from the IRS and the way that they would like sort of these claims to be made as far as like, holdings and everything. But for sure, we'll probably still see state level distinguishing, like I think Nevada's offering something as far as like for trades, and same with Robinhood in certain cities and states to do that. So, yeah, like that's all through the taxes and everything like that. Let's get back to some geopolitics, some mining.
So we covered a while ago, like the supposed rush going on in the Sichuan province in China, and a huge group of miners pretty much buying up equipment on the secondhand market to move over to places with cheaper electricity. And Chloe Zhang from 8BTC had something syndicated on Bitcoin Magazine that's kind of showing that this shift in the market is not just happening as far as the equipment and people looking for equipment. It's also the hosting. And we've seen a lot of farms in the area kind of build out massive capacity for, equipment come the rainy season. And a lot of what we covered last time was kind of painting this picture of a huge rush and everything selling out and people running out of space. But, this is kind of calling a lot of that into question and really saying that a lot of these farms overexpanded and actually have a lot of slots that they haven't sold yet, despite indications of a large amount of used hardware being purchased to put to use in this area. And we've apparently there's even one firm, BitDeer in English, that is starting to undercut under the table the already cheaper price of 0.25 yuan for electricity per kilowatt hour by 0.03 yuan to try and incentivize people to buy these slots. And so like this is just another example of like a real shift in the market dynamic over there. Like it's not only just people not buying new hardware because it's so cheap to acquire used hardware to operate, but I think that same kind of dynamic is moving over to the actual hosting slots in farms. And we might actually wind up seeing them start trying to undercut each other in the way that sailors of used hardware are to try and actually incentivize business. And I mean, it's, it could move towards kind of a race to the bottom, because like we were saying the last time, we went over the situation there, a lot of these mining farms actually they've already paid for this power. Like they've signed contracts with the hydro dams that have the surplus, and so it's there. They paid for it, so it's either sell it or lose it. And if things really get bad enough, I mean, it could easily turn into a situation of some of these farms taking a loss just to be able to recoup some of what they've already paid in terms of, you know, contract arrangements for power from these hydroelectric dams. And I mean, it's, you know, the mining ecosystem is getting brutal, very brutal. And it's not something that, you know, an amateur is really going to be able to survive in if their prime motivation is actually profiting and not just kind of throwing capital around because they don't know what else to do with it.
Yeah, man, there's certainly a lot of stuff getting shaken up in the mining ecosystem with, you know, Bitmain falling and as far as they have. And, you know, like you're saying, people picking up a lot of these used miners and signing some of these cheap electricity contracts to start spinning up a farm that's, you know, like you're saying, I mean, making more of a long-term investment in the system. And I mean, it's good to see that the way that it's sort of breaking up and we're seeing like some real competition there. And, you know, right, you know, the whole home miner situation thing over here, you know, it's like it's hard to find those people that are, you know, still doing that on a hobbyist level. But there are some of these smaller farms and medium-sized farms that are able to sort of carve out a niche if they're willing to sort of take the steps to move to certain areas. And yeah, that's that Sichuan province seems to be the one place that's on fire right now for the competition in these cheap contracts.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this is gonna push you out if you're playing amateur. You're not optimizing your costs. You're at too small of a scale. I mean, this is, you know, things are changing, and you need large scale. You need long-term planning, and you need actual capital to operate at those longer time horizons. Or things like this isn't like it used to be a couple years ago. Like, you're not going to just grab shit at whatever inflated price and plug it in and just rake in profit. Like, things are changing.
Yeah, man. So if there's not any more comments, we can keep going into how this mining ecosystem is evolving.
Shoot.
All right. So, yeah, people are fighting this price war in Sichuan, and that has other miners looking to expand to other locations. But according to this article brought to us by 8BTC and Bitcoin Magazine, it looks like there are some major unknown risk involved with one of those destinations. I'm talking about Iran. And we covered in one of our past episodes how the country is trying to allure miners to the area by offering a very cheap electricity rate, just over half a penny at 0.006 per kilowatt hour. Well, the marketing worked and miners have started to move to the area. However, they weren't expecting all the regulatory uncertainty with the added risk of having their miners seized by the government. The article covers Liu Fang, who owns over 20,000 miners and was looking to move towards Iran to build out his operation with not just cheap energy, but power plant subsidies too. Liu is one of the first larger-scale mining operations to move to the area, and he faced a worrying dilemma when trying to set up his operation. He says, quote, "Because of the country's huge electricity subsidy, the government has added energy-hungry devices to the list of 2,000 banned shipments, and that the risk of miners being detained and confiscated at the border is quite high," close quote. Well, he also speculates, quote, "It's said that Iranian customs have so far confiscated at least 40,000 crypto mining rigs of various models," close quote. All right, so Liu was able to get his first batch of 3,000 miners across the border with the help from an unknown agent who was able to label the miners as computer processors. While he made it past this initial hurdle, there were more in front of him. After getting his miners in the country, he ran into a problem with the power company where he was going to set up shop. They had originally built out a 70-30 profit-sharing model, and at $0.009 dollars per kilowatt hour, which had been abruptly changed to a 50-50 split, and the electricity rate doubled. Since he ran into these issues, he resold his miners to a local steel plant, who once running the machines caused a local uproar from the amount of noise. Once reported by local residents, all the mining machines were seized. Right now, the only place where miners can set up shop and remain in compliance and tariff-free is in the bonded zone of the new cloud computing industrial park in Iran. In order to get in the park, mining investors must put up a refundable deposit towards Iran's electricity grid. The park is pushing nearly 900 megawatts of power, and it said small to medium-sized operations could work in the park as a group. The facilities there house somewhere around 500,000 to 600,000 machines, but with all the risk miners are facing with these large unknowns in moving to the area, right now the park is only seeing 10,000 miners. So it looks like people are trying to get to Iran for some cheap electricity rates, but they're running into all sorts of problems that they weren't expecting, which seems to be the common story when it comes to people moving towards new jurisdictional areas that are just sort of breaking into this. There's a lot of these, they don't really think that much about the noise until it shows up. And, then you get people complaining about the noise, and then they start investigating Bitcoin mining. And then the next thing you know, they're saying it's destroying their environment and so on. So it's evolving over there, but it certainly doesn't look like it's the best place to set up shop right now. So, do you guys have any comment on what's going on in Iran?
I mean, it was always going to be a high risk, high reward situation. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like if you move a sizable investment to a jurisdiction like that, it is what it is. Like things can change, like you can be selectively singled out. And I mean, I think it's a stupid decision to, on the government's part, be hostile to people like this is just like, why? Like, you stand to gain. Like, you can tax this, you can regulate this. Like, it's your jurisdiction. You can dictate the terms, and if it's favorable for you and it's favorable for a miner, like, both parties win. Like, why not play it that way?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that risk over there with the mining ecosystem, and that's where the risk takers go for sure.
It just goes to show, like, the overall landscape is taking, the incentives and twisting them around. It's incentivizing way more risk taking, and I mean, it's like you're the higher the risk, the higher the reward, but also the bigger the risk. Like, you're gambling, and if things bite you in the ass, I mean, that's like, I hope they structure it in a way where it doesn't prevent themselves from operating in the space completely. But
yeah, I mean, it's a risky venture. All right, let's get into this. I think Nopar wants to dig into it. I kind of want to too. This is another little risky adventure of these guys over here at Ethereum. So let's get into these hard forks as a common practice. All right. Well, yeah, we haven't talked about the state of Ethereum's hard forks in a while, but it sounds like the ETH devs are getting excited about the possibilities with them. CoinDesk reports on a core dev meeting, an Ethereum core dev meeting. It's a call that happens twice a month. In the meeting, the discussion got on the topic of using hard forks on a regular basis to enable upgrades to the network. The turnaround on these new forks were estimated as taking as little as 3 months. The Ethereum Foundation's security lead, Martin Swindy, said, quote, "The idea would not be to schedule a hard fork every 3 months, but see if feature X is finished and there exist test cases and it is implemented in all clients. If so, then we can hard fork pretty soon," close quote. Then the team lead of the ETH Foundation, whose name is Peter Silguy, said, quote, "As a client developer, if your only job is to implement hard forks and do them every 3 months is fine, but usually clients require a lot of maintenance. So if you start doing 3-month hard forks, it will essentially take all the time away from general maintenance and performance improvements," close quote. All of this discussion about more hard forks comes because the current ETH 2.0 roadmap includes an upgrade to their virtual machine, EVM, in EIP 615, better known as Istanbul. That's right. They just did their Constantinople hard fork at the tail end of February, and now it's time for another. Well, 2 to be more precise. Swindy admits that the EIP's improvements wouldn't be that noticeable except for external tools. It would require a second fork to make noticeable efficiency gains in the EVM. That one is called eWasm. This fast-paced movement into the unknown future is all a bid to keep investors interested in Ethereum by outpacing competition. One of the co-authors of EIP 615, Brooklyn Zelinka, says, quote, "There are other options for smart contract developers out there. We need to keep Ethereum 1.x alive, and that means continuing to move," close quote. This conversation ended with the conclusion to pick up the debate again in the future dev calls. It's hard to say where Ethereum is going to be in a few months, or even what it is today. Right now, we already have ETC and ETH, and now ETH is Constantinople, and original ETH 2.0 is now just 1.x. And Constantinople has failed to achieve this 2.0 status. It sounds like it's going to take many more hard forks and thought leaders from the Ethereum community finally decide that their global world computer has achieved its 2.0 status. Yeah, it's a strange world over there with Kumbaya built on top of weak bonds, and we're starting to see that, this idea of forking all the way down. So, yeah, what do you guys have to say about all this? I mean, we know that Monero does a hard fork best, standard practice, but they do that with the agenda to try and keep ASICs away and try and keep development moving in a more privacy-centered, where this just sounds like as soon as they develop a new feature that they think should be implemented, they're just going to hard fork it in. And so now that the network's already fractured, it's going to be fractured. Who knows what?
Well, sorry, I just wanted to say, Monero is complex, but it's nowhere near as complex as Ethereum.
Yeah, Monero has a very specific goal. Ethereum does not.
Right. That's where it's like this idea, it seems like it's way out there. It's not actually following any sort of real tenable development. It's really just like, hey, we got a new feature. Let's blast it out and, make a client and sell it to investors. Let's keep this train running.
So did they succeed to hard fork to Constantinople?
Supposedly,
Depends what you mean by success.
Absolutely.
If by success you mean fuck up, call it off at the last minute, then wait a minute, and then redo it, and then push that through, yeah, it was a resounding success.
If success means they did it eventually, yes.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, because Rick, you said that we haven't talked about Ethereum hard forks in a while, but I don't know. I feel like we talk about that almost every episode because there's always something going wrong.
Well, yeah, it's been like a little over a month, I think, since that Constantinople fork, and yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's like right at the end of 2017, all of a sudden was the moment of Bitcoin forks, and I feel like they're in a similar moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like this. It's just not viable. I mean, every time they run into a problem, it's just completely redesign everything from scratch. We'll just start over. We'll just build it from the ground up again. And it's like, how many different proposals are there out for that? How viable is that the bigger they get? How is that going to affect the market when that both sides are going to survive? I mean, it's like they fucked up from the very beginning in not building things out from the start. It was just that whole attitude of if something's broken or doesn't work, we'll just start over again. You can't just start over again. You can't just hit the reset button on something with financial network effects and just pull everything over to something totally different. That's not how reality works. And they're slowly learning that very painfully and hard.
Well, I would argue that it worked.
Please.
They made them a lot of money. I'm pretty sure, if you look at the goal, then you can say it worked.
Well, that's like not following that whole sufficiently decentralized, like purposed use case token model that the SEC has said that Ethereum is.
Well, it's, I'm trying to steer away from just like cracking jokes about like, yeah, they're scammers and they made out like a bandit in no par. I mean, there's a lot of people that just don't get that. It's like my just purely technically in magical fantasy land where most of them aren't a bunch of scamming idiots. Like how they're approaching this just won't work. Like you build a foundation, and once that builds up liquidity and network effect, that's it. It's set. Like you're not just going to snap your finger and move all of those relational things, the value, the network effect, how people perceive it, to something completely new flawlessly. That's not how things work. And it's like there's two things that are going to happen. It's going to die, or they're going to have to sit here and accept this is what it is and just build from that. And they're not going to do that. So like it's inevitably just going to hit a dead end.
So, there was a huge issue in 2018. The world it was going to shit, and someone was looking for a solution to this problem, and that was Bitcoin. Now, Ethereum had the reverse strategy, right? We can do this with blockchain, and we can do this with blockchain, and we will find problems to it later. And this is way you cannot build anything. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, legitimately, that is kind of the way it all started. And I mean, it really is kind of comical the way that they keep reiterating these different clients and different forks. And they say, like, this is all about, like, we need mass adoption and, like, we need good user interface and experience. And, like, we don't really have that. I mean, like not at all. I mean, like, one of the discussions where these devs got together, I remember them saying, or somebody saying, like, if you don't have a GitHub account, then you're not, eligible to talk about Ethereum development. And it's that sort of attitude is like sort of pervasive throughout this like developer centric community, where it's like a niche of people that are just like, yeah, we're building the way that millions of people are going to revolutionize, billions of people are going to revolutionize the world with blockchain, except it is still overly complex, and how exactly it solves an efficiency that Bitcoin doesn't is still hard for us to explain.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I think Nopara hit it on the head. Like, if you're not trying to solve a problem, you're just going to wander around aimlessly until things break.
So what's going on with BitMEX?
Well, this is actually pretty interesting. People look at BitMEX and they think just degen gambling platform. And I'm not, traders know really like how substantial the volume is versus the whole ecosystem there, but I'm not sure about people outside of that. But it's a huge exchange, and it very much is tightly integrated into the market, and to a degree helps steer things despite just being Bitcoin backed futures. But they're planning on kind of expanding into different products. And I mean, I'm going to flip the products around from the order in the article, but one is they're going to try and build out a product to invest in S&P 500 and NASDAQ indexes using Bitcoin with kind of a way to negate the Bitcoin USD exchange risk. And I'm not sure exactly how they're going to structure this. He's talking about swapping through Forex into dollars and then swapping back. So I'm not really sure how that might mitigate the downside of opportunity cost if Bitcoin performs better. I'm not sure if that's really what he's trying to do, but they're pretty much trying to build this out so that people in developing markets can access, the equity markets in the more developed world. And, this is like I said, the last time we talked about Abra kind of expanding into their synthetic products away from fiat currencies towards actual stocks and things like that. Like I think this will be a hugely important thing long term when Bitcoin finishes its parabolic trend and it's more stable. It'll open the access to these kinds of markets. But until we get there, I'm not really sure how well they'll drive demand when people can just hold Bitcoin if it's still performing better. But the second one I'm really interested in, they want to start doing short-term bonds that well-known exchanges or miners can actually issue them. And like this, I think would be very interesting. Like let's say you're an established, trustworthy miner with a relationship with BitMEX, and customers trust BitMEX in this. Like, why couldn't that miner issue a bond for shorter terms to finance an operation expansion? Like you give your Bitcoin to BitMEX, they give it to the miner to fund their operations, and you collect a bond with some. I don't even want to think about like really how the interest rate sets up there. It's probably something that would organically fill in based on the perception of risk there. But people could fund operations through something like this. Like if you need to raise money to build something or expand something, you could issue a bond on BitMEX. People would pay the Bitcoin for that and collect the interest. And then when the bond expires, get their principal back. And I think like this would be a very interesting thing to see really how this plays out. And how this could really facilitate shifting away from not centralized entities involved in things like this, but the ones people are most familiar with. Like how could this kind of market really expand and proliferate and just offer, different, market entities the ability to raise money to actually do something. And like that, I'm really excited to see really who in the space is interested in trying to issue bonds like that.
Yeah, I mean, like like you're saying, I mean, the mining ecosystem for sure. There's we were discussing earlier. There's risk involved, and like if you're somebody that's been a competent mining group for a while, I mean, like why not be able to issue a bond and sort of sustain yourself? And I mean, there's sort of all these sort of options. I think there's going to be more coming on the table in different sectors and everything. And like you're saying, I mean, the S&P thing is big, and I mean that'll be big for whenever Bitcoin is prevalent everywhere and people are looking for a way to get an S&P 500. But the short-term bonds thing, yeah, that's going to be something pivotal going forward. Like BitMEX always trying to do the community right.
What's that? Volatility? Markets or servers down? Fuck, I just butchered that. Volatility, servers down for maintenance.
Yeah, people get upset with the level of volume moving through BitMEX, but it's there for a reason.
All right, no para. So if no input on what Arthur is doing, what awesome fucking news do you got for us, bitch?
Finally. Yeah, I start in the beginning. So Wasabi hardware wallet integration. A couple of days ago, a guy called Melbourne developer opened an issue on Wasabi to integrate Trezor. The Melbourne developer actually had three hardware wallet libraries, one for Trezor, one for Ledger, one for KeepK. All right, and in .NET in C#. So I was really happy. Okay, so well, as every responsible Bitcoin developer would do, all right, I'm gonna copy paste your code. Well, but I had to figure out that this hardware wallet rabbit hole goes very, 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 very deep. you need so many dependencies and trusting on so many people's code in order to be able to communicate with the hardware wallet that I just lost my mind. I I didn't know what to say. It's crazy. It's just not gonna happen. I I I worked so hard in the past half a year to remove every last bit of dependency from Wasabi that we had, and the only one that we really have is that Nicolas Dorier's and Bitcoin, which we are contributing to, and Avalonia, our UI library, which we have a maintainer from that. So anyway, and then this stupid hardware wallet thing's coming around, and I have to introduce so many dependencies. So I started to look at alternatives, and I saw that Bitcoin Core is integrating hardware wallets too. And how they are doing is that uh, Andrew Cho wrote a library called Hardware Wallet Integration. That's a very creative name. So the hardware wallet integration is a Python software, a CLI tool, which you can call hardware wallets with a unified interface, and you can talk to hardware wallets. I'm like, this is awesome. Okay, does it even work, or what's going on with this? But it was 10, 11 p.m. at night, and I went to sleep, and I couldn't sleep. I just wanted to figure out if this concept really works, because it had Trezor, Ledger, KeepKey, Bitbox, and Cold Card integrated. So I really wanted to figure out if this really worked. So at 11 p.m. I got up, and the next thing I know, it's 5 a.m. in the morning, and I got hardware wallet integration to Wasabi. A couple of things doesn't work yet. For example, every hardware wallet except Cold Card. But yeah, so it was really, he just saved so many time for me, and the dependencies too, because I talked to Andrew Cho, and he said they stripped out all the code, all, and looked at every dependency sees that they are using, and stripped out the code from those ones too. So only the relevant code is inside, and the Bitcoin core developers are reviewing that code, and I was so happy, and it's almost ready. So, but unfortunately, it looks like it's not that unified, this hardware wallet integration library, because it doesn't seem to work with anything else but Cold Card. Unfortunately, I don't have anything else to test on yet, but I'm trying to get a hold of every hardware wallet out there, so I can test it and I can figure out what's going on. Yeah, this is an interesting story too. Novak from Cold Card, when I launched Wasabi, he wanted to send me a Cold Card, and I told him to not send me a Cold Card, because I'm not going to integrate hardware wallets at all. But he was pushy, so okay, send me, but I'm not going to integrate it. And now here we are, and only Cold Card is integrated. So I guess he made the right decision there.
You don't have to bother with the other ones, man. You got the only one that matters working.
Yeah, I mean, it's creating more work, because now the questions are coming in, that when is this hardware wallet, when is that hardware wallet. Someone wanted Red Ledger, not the non-OS, but the first ledger, and that's not working. So these kind of things. But anyway, it's great that the Bitcoin core developers took the time and wrote a unified hardware wallet interface. And I'm pretty sure the reason why it doesn't work is because in Wasabi, I'm abusing that library a little bit in a way to make it much more convenient for the user. But I might have to take some Electrum wallet design choices there, like not auto recognizing hardware wallets and things like that. But we'll see. I will make the best decisions and hope for the best. So probably every hardware wallet will be integrated. Every main hardware wallet will be integrated into Wasabi. So, and it's really, it's 2 weeks, like not even 2 weeks. I wanna release in a week or something, because we gave out a release a long time ago, almost a month ago, and so many things were fixed, and now it's just so much better to use Wasabi than the one that's on the website. So yeah, it's a huge step. Well, of course, you cannot CoinJoin with hardware wallets, so that definitely sucks. But well, there is that.
Dude, don't worry about it, man. Just don't get yourself in a knot. You don't got to do anything else. Everybody can just get a cold card.
Yeah, I mean, like a cold card is definitely on my list, and I mean, like that's the users that are gonna for sure be the guys that are going after this first. And yeah, just like I want to like stand up and applaud. I mean, it'd kind of be like a little, you know, it's not appropriate. I mean, like, you know, you need like a standing ovation for what you guys are doing over there at Wasabi, man. I mean, whenever I saw you guys were, you know, putting this together, I didn't know you had done it in a early morning free flow state there in just a few hours. That's amazing, man. Like, yeah, just you know, I know the community feels this way, and I feel this way. Just can't thank you enough for the work you're doing for Bitcoin, man. I mean, and Bitcoiners everywhere.
You know, I was so effective because I got a lot of help that I don't usually get, like the author of hardware wallet integration, Andrew Chu, and he's the author of PSBT2, and he was helping me and stuff. And the who created the PSBT integration to end Bitcoin, that I was keep chatting with him to oh my god, I don't remember his name. Okay, Japanese guy. Anyway, thank you very much. And quote card, Peter, someone from quote card was helping me to quickly debug and fix stuff that I had to fix. So yeah, I and almost instantly replied everyone like crazy. I can't reply. I can reply in 2 days or 3 days, but man, these guys were helping me so much. So thanks. Yeah, and thanks for Melbourne developer, and sorry for not using your library, but thank you for pushing me into actually looking into alternatives to how to do this thing. Yeah.
Well, it's gonna be awesome, man.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, guys. So I guess it is that time for final thoughts.
Yeah, my final thought is gonna be easy. First off, like yeah, just again, you know, Wasabi hardware wallet integration, like keep up to date with that. That's gonna be pretty big in the future. And you know, go to your meetups, and I'm gonna try and bring this up at the beginning of next episode. Timestamps. We're gonna be doing these timestamps from now on. So you know, if you want to, you know, come in and just flip to a certain part of the story, you know, you'll be able to do that now.
All right, Janine, what's this? What's this thing?
That thing is a joke that I found because since one of the stories I did was about taxes, I thought it was pretty hilarious. So this is like the conversation you have every year with the government, where the government says, "You owe us money. It's called taxes." And you say, "How much do I owe?" And the government says, "You have to figure that out." And you say, "I just pay what I want." And the government says, "Oh no, we know exactly how much you owe, but you have to guess what that number is." And you say, "What if I get it wrong?" You go to prison. That's basically what happens every year.
Yeah.
Shit.
So my final thought is that Julian Assange is in jail and Craig Wright is not. So think about that.
Right on, man. What a backwards world we live in.
Yeah, well, I really don't have one right now, so I guess we'll call that game. And toodaloo till next week, everybody.
Bye.